Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Samach Vav 66. We are at the Mishnah, 4 lines down on Samach Vav Amud Aleph on 66a. And we are continuing our discussion of different sins for which one is punished with stoning. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll really get started. So here we go. So the Mishnah is going to start with Shabbos. Now we have a whole Masechet on Shabbos, so not surprisingly, the Gemara on this Mishnah is pretty short because, again, much of Shabbos is dealt with in Masechet Shabbos, which is one of the longer Masechtot. But in any event, Hamachal Shabbos, so one who violates Shabbos, and Rashi tells us, Dechoshev le Tana b'niskalin. That this is going to be the author of our Mishnah, the Tana of our Mishnah, is going to include this in those categories of people who get skila, of people who get stoning. Kigon shechalu b'melacha gemura, where you violated Shabbos through some of complete action. So b'davar shechayavin al zadonos kares, and so to be subject to stoning, you also would need to be subject to kares, where when you do it on purpose. But why would you not get stoning? After all, if the person did the sin on purpose, shouldn't he be stoned? The answer is that there were no witnesses and there was no warning. So as a result, you're not going to kill the person. So as a result, instead of stoning, the person will get kares, which is essentially a heavenly punishment that effectively removes the person from among the Jewish people and results in a shorter life in this world and exclusion from the benefits of the world to come. And Val Shigaso Chatas. And when it comes to that same action that we want to say is going to result in stoning or result in kares, well, then it would have to result in a sin offering if you did it unintentionally. So the idea being that these three potential results of a person's action are tied together. Only if it were the kind of action that would result in a sin offering would you also, if you did it on purpose, would you be subject to kares? And only such an action, which if you did it unintentionally, would you be subject to a chatas and if you did it intentionally, would you be subject to kares? If you also had witnesses and warning, would you be subject to stoning? So all three of them are the same category. Miklal, what's the implication? De'ika midi dechil Shabbos havi, that the ein chayavin lo al shegaso chatas v'lo al zidono kares. But the implication is when we say hamachalas hashabbos bidavar shechayavin al zidonos kares, that when we say that among those who violate Shabbos, if it is the thing that causes somebody to be subject to kares, so that implies that there are things that won't be subject to kares and won't be subject to a sin offering. So the question is, v'lo al zidonos lo al shigaso chatas v'lo al zidono kares. It seems like there should be things that you could do that are not going to get you into that level of trouble. So Maihi, what are they? So two possibilities. Tchumen v'aliba de Rabbi Akiva, the Havara and Havara v'aliba de Rabbi Yossi. So let's take a look at the first two Rashis on the Gemara. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9 lines down in the narrow lines on Samach Vav and Aleph. Tchumen v'aliba de Rabbi Akiva, d'yalav lahu mikrai b'Masechah Sota, that Rabbi Akiva in Masechah Sota derives the prohibition of walking beyond 2,000 amot from psukim. The rabbis disagree and say that that's only a rabbinic prohibition, that we're not supposed to go more than 2,000 tfachim outside of our city on Shabbos. And Havara v'aliba de Rabbi Yossi, as we continue in the next Rashi, de Amar lelav yatzas, that according to Rabbi Yossi, he says, why did the Torah specifically note the prohibition of setting a fire in connection with Shabbos? No other mitzvah is mentioned. No other specific Av Malacha is mentioned on Shabbos. So he says that it's not to tell us that all of the rules are the same, but rather it's to say something unique about fire, namely that it is only a lav and it does not result in the death penalty and kares and achatas. So as a result, it's a different category, and so that's why it's mentioned separately. The Rabbi Akiva Moda. Now, if we say that according to Rabbi Akiva, we're continuing in the Rashi. If we say according to Rabbi Akiva that he derives tchum from psukim in the Torah, how come it's not subject to the death penalty? We already explained why, according to Rabbi Yossi, it's not subject to the death penalty, because that's specifically why it was mentioned separately. But Rabbi Akiva modanami betchumin de'ein chayavin aleim kares, but he would admit. Rabbi Akiva would admit that there's no subject; it's not subject to kares if you violate the boundary, if you walk beyond 2,000 amos. Ditanan, because we learned in Masechet Shabbos in a Mishnah, Avot Malachot Mem Chasar Achat. There are 39 Av Malachot, and one of them that's and going beyond the boundary is not listed. So as a result, the low Palig Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva doesn't argue on that Mishnah that lists 39. He doesn't say, "Oh yes, there are 40." No, he does not. So as a result, he's going to say that it's not going to be subject to kares. So that's our discussion of Shabbos, and we're ready for the next Avera, sin that somebody could do and be stoned.
So what does the other one say? What does each one say about the other thing? Where is it? What would Rabbi? Because we've excluded two of these according to different
yeah. So
Rabbi Yossi, two different Tanaim, right?
Well, I mean, so there are two levels of question in what you're saying. Meaning, what about all the rabbis who disagree with both Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi? What is the implication of our Mishnah? Now, I think that the simplest implication is if you don't perform the entire action, then you're not going to be subject to kares, and you're not going to be subject to achatas, and you're not going to be subject to the death penalty. So that to me is one possible answer that we could give to sort of like, what does everybody else say? But in terms of how Rabbi Yossi thinks about Rabbi Akiva's issue of the boundaries, Rabbi Yossi, presumably, like the rest of the rabbis, would say no, the boundaries are only rabbinic, and that's not, and would disagree with it. And when it comes to Rabbi Akiva's view of Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Akiva would say, like again, the rest of the rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Yossi, and say no. When we separated the law of Havara, it was to tell us that just by Havara, you have all of the rules of that you get skila and you get and kares, etc., and all the other details. So all those details of every other prohibition of Shabbos is learned in connection with fire, meaning that the fire is not separate and a unique case, but rather it's the case that is representative of every other malacha.
So what person would be chayv in skila then?
And absolutely would be chayv in skila when it comes to the flame, exactly. But according to the rabbis in connection with boundaries, you're not even chayiv anything d'oraisa, it's just rabbinic. Okay, so now we go to cursing a parent. Hamakalal avivimo eno chayiv ad shikalem b'shem. You are only going to be liable. You're not going to be liable until you curse them by name. Kill them bekinoi. But if you use some kind of and curse them by name of God, just to be clear, that achikalim b'shem. Take a look in Rashi. First Rashi on the Mishnah. She kalel b'shemot hagamurin. You need to use a complete name of God. So, but kalam bekinoi. If you use a nickname, and Rashi tells us what are they? Kigon shakai tzvakot. Chanun, Rachum. So even names like Shakai and Tzvakot, which if you were to write in a holy way, you wouldn't be able to erase, along with Chanun, Rachum, which you can erase. They are all names that you would not. Rabbi Meir says Mechayev. Rabbi Meir would still hold you liable, but the Chachamim would say no, you're not going to be liable for cursing parents if you use one of these other names. So, man chachamim, who are these chachamim in this Mishnah that say that say that you're going to be exempt if you use something that isn't the name of God. So it's Rabbi Menachem Rabbi Yossi. It's Rabbi Menachem Tanya, Rabbi Menachem Rabbi Yossi, Omer, Binakvo Shem Yumat. When the Torah says, this is a pasuk in Vayikra Parakaf Daled pasuk Tezayin, excuse me, Matal Melomar Shem. Why does it say when he blasphemes the name he shall be put to death? So limeid al mikalel avi ve'imo. This is coming to teach you with respect to a father and mother. She'enu chayiv ad shikal b'shem. You have to actually use the name of God in other because the point is that binakvo yumat. It's the pasuk is already talking about that pasuk in Parak Dalet of Vayikra is already talking about one who is blaspheming. So as a result, we're clearly talking about cursing the quote unquote blessing of God. And so as a result, we can't use this word to teach us something about this particular law. So we'll use it to teach about a similar law, namely that just as cursing God involves God's name, so too cursing parents involves God's name. So now we're going to analyze the Gemara cites a brisa that explains what we learned from the verse in Vayikra Parakaf Pasuk Tet. The verse says, "For any man who will curse his father and mother shall be put to death. His father and his mother he has cursed; his blood is upon himself." So
That's to use specifically the name of God.
What?
Specifically, one has to use the name of God here, right?
Correct.
So it's interesting, Rabbi Jack Abramowitz in his OU, he writes for the OU. He says, he wrote that people ask the question about what do we mean by the name of God? And now, which name of God is this? And he said, he wasn't referring to the Gemara, I don't think, but he says people often write God, G and a slash and a D, and they don't. He says, actually, that's not necessary. That's not the halakha. The halakha doesn't require that. People do want to be more marked with. And he says that only that we use God in the different other languages, but the object of blasphemy or cursing or using God's name in vain only applies with the specific names of God in Lashon HaKodesh. Otherwise, it's not that we don't poskin that would be using God's name in vain, basically.
That very well may be the case, and thank you for sharing that. And and I don't think that anything we've said suggests otherwise.
No.
You're absolutely right and indeed that is, it may be that he's getting it from our Mishnah because it made very clear that if you want to curse at least a parent and be subject to the death penalty, you have to use a real name of God and not just a nickname of God. You need to use one of the main names of God, and it needs to be a complete version of that name. So absolutely. So now we're going to again learn through this brisa the different lessons of this verse, the Vayikra Parakaf Pasuk Tet, and as part of that, we are going to be citing other verses that prohibit curses. We're going to have one of those verses actually this week's Parsha, in Parshas Mishpatim. We have the prohibition of cursing. It says that you can't curse Elokim, or it could be Elohim. It depends on whether it's a holy sense of God, that would be Elokim, or it could be a judge, and that would be Elohim. And we are going to see that. We're going to see that during the course. And then the other one in Vayikra, Parak Yud Tet, Pasuk Yud Daled, is that we're not allowed to curse the death. Meaning the point is that it's not about the fact that the person could hear your curse. It's more than that. And we're going to use all of those three psukim to teach us more about this prohibition of cursing parents. And all of that is going to be dealt with in this long brisa. So let's take a look. Ish, ma Talmud lomer ish ish. We could have just said, right, the pasuk begins any man. But that's the Hebrew version of any man is ish ish. It could have just said ish. Why did it need to say ish ish? Larabos bas tum androgynous. So the point is, it doesn't make a difference the gender of the child who's doing the cursing. Whatever the gender is, we're going to say that you're subject to this prohibition. Asher yikalel es aviv esimo. And again, tum is one who's genitals are covered, and androgynous has aspects of both. And so Asher Yikalel as Aviv es Imo, who's going to curse his father and his mother. Eli ela Aviv Imo. I would only learn from this that you have to curse both of them. Aviv shalo imo, imo shalo aviv minayin. How would I know that if the mother without the father without the mother and the mother without the father, that you would also be subject to this penalty? Talmud Lomar. So then the second half of the verse says aviv imo kilel damavo. The second half of the verse says again that the father and the mother. Now, how does that teach us anything? So Rashi explains in Aviv Shalo Imo V'Imo Shalo Aviv Minayin Talmud Lomer Aviv V'Imo Kilel. It's right opposite the last Tosfos in on the left-hand side. So this is on the Rashi on the right-hand side. Kolomar samach klala birosh hamikra la'aviv ubisofo samach la'imo. Well, if we go back to the verse, and it's on the screen so that you can see it, right? At the beginning of that verse, it says, for any man who will curse his father and mother. Well, the word curse is near the word father. And in the end of the verse, it says that his father and his mother he has cursed. So which is the parent that is closest to the word curse there? The mother. So as a result, we see that that's how we get the derivation, that you get both of them. Aviv kilel, imo kilel. If he is prohibited to curse his father alone and his mother alone. Divri Rabbi Yoshia. That's what Rabbi Yoshia says. Rabbi Yonasan Omer. Rabbi Yonasan says no. Mashma shnei ke'echad. You don't need to tell me a second time. You don't need any kind of special derivation to tell me that that you're not allowed to curse your father and your mother, that it means you can't curse either your father or your mother. Every time that the Torah says an and, it could mean or. But umashma echad b'fnei atzmo. Each of them, it applies ke'echad, it implies together, mashma shneim ke'echad, umashma echad b'fnei atzmo, and it implies both of them individually. When do you require it to be together? Ad sheyifrot lecha hakasuv yachdav, until the Torah itself says to you the word yachdav. And that actually does happen, because we have in Klayim an example. So let's take a look at Rashi. Now we're the next Rashi, which is again opposite the very end of the last Tosos on Samach Vav Amud Aleph. So Rabbi Yonatan Omer, mitchilas hamikra mashma et aviv et imo. That actually even the very beginning of the verse, the implication of the father and the mother is that it means either. That even though a vav, the word and, adds to what you had already said, mashmanami echad mehem, it could also mean or, and it could be that either one of them. Ad sheyifrat lecha kasuv yachdav, until the Torah itself goes out and says, you know what, it needs to be both together. How does it do that? Just as the Torah went out of its way and specified in connection with Klayim. Shekasuv bo, because what does it say there? Lo takarosh b'shor v'chamor. You're not allowed to plow with your ox and your donkey. So uprat bo yachdav, and then the next word in that pasuk is yachdav, together. So shelo tomar asur lacharosh b'shor levado ubachamor levado, because we don't want, God forbid, anybody to think that the prohibition on plowing is with either an ox or a donkey. That would really be very limiting if we were to say that. So va'aviv v'imo kilel deseifa darish le Rabbi Yonatan lekaman be'elu hein hanichnakim l'rabos es hamakalo la'achar misa. And what does Rabbi Yonatan do with the second half of the verse, right? So Rabbi Yoshia needed the second half of the verse to tell us that it's the mother or the father, and that will subject you to the skila. But he already learned that with the first half of the verse. So what does he do with the second half of the verse? Well, in the Perek Eluheina Nechnakin, which we'll be seeing soon, L'Rabos Esa Makalo La'achar Misa, it comes to teach you that you can't even curse your parents after they have passed away. So the point is that is a continuing law and not one that ends with their lives. So back into the Gemara. We are now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines up in the narrow lines on Samach Vav and Aleph. For last word on the line, Mot Yumat. So what does it tell us about what is the words Mot Yumat tell us? Beskila, it means stoning. Ataomer Beskila. Oh, how do I know that it really means stoning and not something else? Nemar Kandamavo. It says over here that at the end of that pasuk, it says that the blood is going to be on him. V'nemar lahalan demayim bam. And when it comes to the Ov and Yidoni, it says that their blood will be on them. And over there, it says specifically that the punishment is stoning. So too over here, we'll say that the punishment is stoning. Malahalan lebiskila, afkan beskila. So, onesh shamanu, azhara minayan. We have again a rule that we've seen several times in Sanhedrin, that not only does the Torah need to tell you what the punishment is for something, but it also needs a separate pasuk to give you some sense of warning about the fact that you are going to be punished with this. And so where is that warning? So Talmud Lomar, from this week's Parsha, Elohim lo tikalel. You should not curse a judge. Now, the first part of this, the reason that I said Elohim is because we mean in this case the non-holy thing. We mean the judge, and we will see, and I will try and be very careful to make sure to use Elohim when I mean God. Im haya aviv dayan harayhu b'chal Elohim lo tikalel. Look, if your father was a judge, right, then you're not allowed. You would have two prohibitions of cursing your father. You'd have the prohibition that we have in Parshas, in Sefer Vayikra, and we'd also have the prohibition that is in this week's Parsha. V'im haya aviv nasi, and if your father was a leader of the people, well then, don't worry about it. Harehu bichlal. The end of that pasuk of Elohim lo tikalel is v'nasi v'amacha lo taor. You're not supposed to curse the your people, your leaders of your people. So as a result, eno lo dayan v'lo nasi minayan. So in second, but all right, fine. You've now told me that that cursing a father who is a judge or a leader is going to be prohibited, and we have a warning for it in this week's parsha. But there are a lot of fathers who are not judges and leaders. So Amarta Hare Ata Dan Binyan Av Mishnehen. We're going to try and create a Binyan Av, basically a general rule from the two of them. Lo Reiz Nasi Dayan. A leader is different from a judge. Lo Rei Dayan Kari Nasi. And a judge is different from a leader of a people. So Lori Dayan Kirinasi, a judge is different from a leader. Share Dayan Atametsuva al Horaato. You are specifically commanded to fulfill what the judge says. When a judge reaches a decision, you have to follow it. Now, you also have to follow things that the leader says, but it's a different kind of situation. It's not their halakhic decisions, it's their decisions that are commands. So but on the other hand, when you have a leader, you're not obligated to come follow what they decide halakhically. And moreover, a leader is not like a judge. You're not allowed to rebel against the leader. But you're not like a judge. A judge, you're not commanded not to rebel against him. You're just commanded to follow his rulings in halachic matters. So what is the common characteristic of both of them? Shehein ba'amcha, they're members of the Jewish people. V'atam muzhar al kilotam, and you're prohibited to curse them. So afani avi avicha, so too your father, he's also going to be somebody who's among your nation, and you're not allowed to curse them. Sheba'amcha v'atam muzhar al kiloto. So don't that we now have derived a method for saying that that a father does have a warning, because we're going to learn it from the combination of a judge and a leader. But that's going to be problematic, because what would you say about a judge and a leader? Are they the top echelon of the people or the lowest echelon of the people?
Certainly not the lowest.
They're not the lowest, they're the top echelon. So I don't understand. You could argue and undermine the binyan av that we just created and say, listen, I can tell you why that it's not going to work out, because maybe it's just you can't curse the top echelon of people. Talmud Lomar lo tekalel cheresh. So that's why we have the pasuk in Vayikra Parak Yud Tet pasuk Yud Dalid, where it says, you know what? You also can't curse a deaf person. The lesser people of the nation, people who are not the leaders, are also going to be subject to this prohibition. So so garmalo So when it comes to a deaf person, it's the deafness that caused him to prevent him from being cursed. So, but Nasi and Dayan aren't deaf, so as a result, that's not a problem for them. Nasi Dayan Shekain Gedula Sangar Malahem Cherish Yochiach. And when it comes to a judge and a leader who their greatness is what causes us not to be able to curse them, a cherish, a deaf person, shows that that's not crucial to the prohibition of cursing because there are din, and we repeat the same process. So basically, what does it come out? Lo re'izeh k'rizev, lo re'izeh k'rizev. This one isn't like that one. That one isn't like this one. So atzara shavah shebehen shehein ba'amcha va'ata muzhar al kilatan. Back to our original conclusion. They are part of your nation and you're not allowed to curse to them. So as a result, afani avi avicha sheba'amcha va'ata muzhar al kilato. So we're going to say your father is also in that group and therefore you can't curse them. So in second, that still doesn't work because what do we just do? We highlighted all people who are different from the average guy. So malatzada shavah shebehen shekain meshunin. They're changed. They're different. They're not a normal. They're not the regular you and me. So maybe that's why. Ella imkein nichtov kra o Elohim v'cheresh o nasi v'cheresh. So all right, here's how come we can say that your father is included, because if we were just trying to teach about people who are different, so then we could either just teach about the judge and the deaf or the leader and the deaf, because that would be enough to say, you know what, people who are different we have to be careful about. But why Elohim lamali? Why did we also teach about the judge? So in the end, we're not going to use it as a binyan av, but rather we're going to use an Eino Inyan and say that because this Elohim that we have in this week's parsha isn't really needed, because you already told me leaders and you already told me somebody who's deaf. So of course judges would be included in the nature of people who are different. So as a result, what does Elohim tell me? But rather it tells me that where we started in the very beginning, that even if your father is not a judge, you're not allowed to curse. And of course that goes to a mother as well. As your parent, you're not allowed to curse. So okay, so that is the brisa, and it was a great brisa. And now we're going to ask some questions, because
So what's the learning here from that we're learning not from the judge towards the father, or that we don't even need the word lo tekaleh Elohim?
Yes, exactly. That because just by having not cursing a leader and not cursing a deaf person, we would know that anybody different would be prohibited to curse. So as a result, why does the Torah say lo tekalel Elohim? It's to tell you that parents also cannot be cursed. That's exactly, and to provide the warning for that prohibition, meaning we have now, as a result, the warning for not cursing your father is lo tekalel Elohim, because it isn't necessary for that purpose. We don't need it to tell us that you can't curse a judge.
Are we considering the father like a judge then?
No, that's the whole point. We don't need it to tell us about the judge. And so as a result, we're going to use it to expand the prohibition of cursing and say this cursing of Elohim, of God, of a judge, is considered actually a prohibition on cursing a parent as well.
Well, we already have the pasuk lo tekalel
No, but we have that only tells us the penalty is going to be stoning. We got to this question because we need to also have a second pasuk in the Torah that tells us the prohibition of cursing a god in order, of cursing a parent, in order to have a warning. You need to always have two psukim in order to be able to punish somebody. You need a pasuk that details what the punishment is, and you need a pasuk that tells us that you're not allowed to do it. So you need both of them. And so that's what this is coming to tell us, that the lo tekalel Elohim, that you can't curse a judge, is telling us, no, you know what? That is the warning that you can't curse a parent.
So therefore, cursing a judge is not a crime and not criminal.
No, of course it would be, because you could learn cursing a judge just from the fact that you're not allowed to curse a deaf person and you're not allowed to curse a leader. Both of those are people who are not your typical average guy. So too, a judge is not your typical average guy, and you would not be allowed to curse him.
So if there are other people in society that not average, so that we talk about the summa and a person who's elaim and so forth, they're somewhat different.
I think that you could very much argue that this brisa is telling us that that cursing anybody who is different from you is prohibited in the Torah, based on the combination of not cursing a leader and not cursing the deaf. That's exactly what you're exactly right, 100%. Now,
so did we answer the question? Okay, so all right, so did we answer the question?
Yeah, so
suppose the father's the king. Does that incur two lavim? Is that two penalties?
So obviously you can't get stoned twice. So that's not. But and also I don't think that the penalty for cursing a judge may not be stoning. So I don't think that the point is just that it's prohibited. But yes, it would be you would be violating two lavim. Absolutely, I think that's exactly correct. Okay, so now all of what we've just been dealing with is using Elohim as meaning judge. But what do you do? So that's where the Gemara is going to go next. So we're 1, 2, 3, just to catch us back up into the Gemara. Where are we? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines up from the bottom of Samach Vav Amud Aleph, second to last word on the line. So Hanich Lamanda Amar Elohim Chol, that it makes sense if we say that Elohim is a secular thing, meaning it's a judge. But Lamanda Amar Kodesh, but the one who says it's not Elohim, but it's Elokim, and it's holy and it's referencing God, Ma'ikal Amemar. How does he answer the question of what's your source for saying that there's a general prohibition that there is a warning in connection with cursing a parent? So Titania Elohim Chol Divrei Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael says that the word is Elohim and it's referring to judges. Rabbi Akiva Omer Elokim Kodesh. He says no, the word is Elokim and it's holy. Vitanya Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer Azhar lemevarach es Hashem minayin. How do I have a warning that you're not allowed to curse God? So Talmud Lomar Elokim lo tekalel. So we see that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov agrees with Rabbi Akiva and says that it's holy. So we see that there's a machlokas about it. But what do Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer do in order to figure out that there's a source for the prohibition of cursing a parent? Because we have a punishment, but we don't have a warning. So Lamanda Amar Elohim Chol Gamar Kodesh Mechol. Now, when it comes to the person, Rabbi Yishmael, who says that Elohim means judge, so then he can learn the prohibition of cursing God from that same verse, because if you're not allowed to curse a judge, of course you're not allowed to curse God. So Lamanda Amar Elokim Kodesh, but now according to the one who says that Elokim is Kodesh, according to Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer, Gamrinan Chol Kodesh. So he's going to say that you need to learn the secular, the profane, from the holy, that we can't curse a judge from the fact that we can't curse God. But Bishlam Lamanda Amar Elohim Chol Gamar Kodesh Mechol, it makes total sense to learn from the secular to the holy. Elamad Amar Elokim Kodesh Gamar Chomi Kodesh. How do you learn the secular from the holy? Dilma al Kodesh Azhar Achol Lo Azhar. Maybe you're not allowed to curse God, but you're allowed to curse a judge. Who says that you can't? So Im Kain Lichtov Kra Lo Takel. So now we're going to say that, you know what? The wording, right? It says Elokim Lo Takalel. So that is teaching us that you can't, that the repetition of that lamed is not necessary. You could just say Elokim Lo Takel. That also means that you can't curse. So why does it say as we turn to Samach Vav Bet, my Lo Takalel? Why does this repetition of the second lamed? Shmami Natarti. We learn two things. Not only can you not curse God, but you're not allowed to curse a judge also. And now that we say that you're also not allowed to curse a judge, our learning from judge to parent is now complete. And now everybody, whether you think the word is Elokim and it refers to God, we can still say that you're not allowed to curse a judge and also not allowed to curse a parent from this pasuk in this week's parsha. And if you say it means Elohim, if you say Elohim means judge, so then of course it refers to a parent as well. So as a result, we now have a warning, and we're ready to go on to the next transgression. So
we're learning two things. Can we learn that you can't
according to those who say,
and
according to those who say,
according
to those who say that the word is Elokim, that it refers to God, because it says Lo Tekalel, it doesn't only refer to God, it would also refer to a judge. Okay, so Habal Na'ara Ma'orasa Eino Chayev. If you have relations with a betrothed Na'ara, you're not liable for stoning. She needs to be a Na'ara, meaning that she's between 12 and 12 and a half. Bitula, she needs to be a virgin. Ma'orasa, she needs to be betrothed. And she needs to be staying in her father's house. Ba'alash Naim. If two men have relations with her, Harishon Beskila Vasheni Bechenek, the first one will be killed by stoning because they violated what we just said. And the second is with strangulation because they have had relations with a married woman, with a betrothed woman, and a betrothed woman is subject to the ordinary case is subject to strangulation. And so as a result, they're covered by strangulation. Now, why do we necessarily need to specifically deal with this case? Meaning, why say this in particular? So Rashi helps us out here, and he suggests Vasheni Bechenek, last Rashi in the Mishnah, Debu'ulahi, because she's had relations. And we can say that this is like Rebbe. D'amar shalo kedarka nafkale miklal basula lekaman. Because we're going to see that Rebbe says that even if one were to have relations in the non-normal fashion, meaning anally as opposed to vaginally, we would say that you're not allowed to have that just because that even if you have relations in the non-normal way, that still takes you out of the category of basula. And so that's why we need to give the specific example that even if the first man had relations with her in the non-normal manner, and so as a result, from all outside appearances, she would appear to be a virgin, we're not going to consider her a virgin in connection with the laws of a Na'ara Hamorasa, and so the person will not get stoning. So the rabbis teach in Brisa.
Is that so? Doesn't the Chumash regarding Rivka imply otherwise? Because the Torah, Rashi says there, Gam Shalo Badarka, Gam also says she didn't have relation, not only Badarka, but also Lo Badarka, right?
No, isn't that the whole point? The
No,
point
I'm
is that
saying no, so that implies that it does.
that's consistent. It's a completely consistent because the point is that the reason that the Torah was telling us that she didn't have relations in either way is to say that she was a total virgin, and that's exactly what you need in order to have the prohibition of a nara morasa.
Um, I don't know. I'm
Okay,
thinking it
all right, you
differently.
can think about it. Let me keep going. So Tana Rabbanan. So the Gemara now is going to quote a brisa that explains the source of our Mishnah's ruling, analyzing the verse in Dvarim Perikav Bet Pasuk Gimel. If there will be a virgin Nara who is betrothed to a man, that's the beginning of the verse, and the point is that that's the situation. So Tana Rabbanan Nara v'lo bogeret. It means a Nara and not somebody who's 12 and a half and older. Betula v'lo beula. Can't meaning virgin means virgin. Mahorasa v'lo nesua. Mahorasa means that she has erisin, she's done kedushin, but she's not fully married. She hasn't done nesuin. She hasn't gone to the chuppah. Beveit aviha, she has to be in her father's house. Prat l'shamasar ha'av l'shluchei abal. The exception is that you can't have a situation where the parent where the father has handed the daughter off to the agents of the husband and they are going to bring her to the husband, because once that has happened, on some level she is more married. Even though she's not fully married, she's more married than she is in her father's house. There's less of a sense of a violation in that sense. So Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Zo Divrei Rebbe Meir. This is all according to Rebbe Meir, because the Chachamim would say, so what is it about this that is like Rebbe Meir? So the fact is that when we just said a Nara is not liable, it seems to suggest that even a minor would also not be liable. But the Chachamim disagree. Aval Chachamim omrim Nara morasa afilu ketana b'mashba. Even a minor who is has done kedushin, and how can she do kedushin? Because her father is allowed to facilitate that kedushin. So even in that situation, that would also be subject to stoning. Amrle Rav Acham Difni Ravina Mimai Demaslisin Rebbe Meir here. How do you know that our Mishnah is actually Rebbe Meir Ulamaute Katana Nami, and that when we say she needs to be a Nara, it excludes not only a Bageret, but it also excludes a minor. Dilma Rabbananhi Ulamaute Bagaret Vesulo. Maybe it's according to the rabbis, and all of our Mishnah is trying to say is that she needs to be a Nara and not a Bogeret, but she could still be a minor. So Amrle Ha Eno Chayav. Our Mishnah specifically says that she is that there's not going to be liability until. It could have said Ella. If in fact it were supposed to be only a nara, so then I might say, if it said only a nara, so then I might say that it means also one who is that one who's a minor is also subject. The sulomidi, and so as a result, there's nothing more. So again, according to our Mishnah, it says that until she is a nara, she is not liable, and only when she's a nara is there liable. So therefore, a minor is not going to. There's not going to be liability for stoning in connection with a minor. But when it comes to the Chachamim would say no. Even a minor would be able to, and that's why our Mishnah must be Rebbe Meir. Okay, so now that we've said that our Mishnah is Rebbe Meir, so the Gemara is going to ask on this. So related question. So Boimine Rabbi Yaakov bar Adam Rav Ba'alakatana Ma'orasa Rebbe Meir Mahu. What's the law according to Rebbe Meir if you have relations with the minor? Meaning there are two possibilities. If we say that you aren't subject to the law of Na'ara Rasa, it could be that you're not subject to that law, but you're still subject to the law of being executed because the girl is betrothed. Or legamri mamayle, or maybe it's completely excluded and you don't get the death penalty at all. O miskila mimayle, or do you only not get skila? That's the question. So Amrle mistabra miskila mimayle. Makes most sense to say that it's only from the skila that you don't get, but you would be subject to strangulation, and of course that certainly makes a lot of sense. V'hachsiv umesu gam shnehem. Well, in second, the pasuk says, this is a pasuk dvarim parak bet pasuk kaf bet. Actually, it says that both of them are going to die. Maybe you might think, Achiyahu Shneim Shavin. Maybe only you're going to impose the penalty if, in fact, you're going to impose the same penalty on both of them, meaning only if both of them are executed. So Shasik Rav. Rav didn't have the answer, and so he was quiet. Amar Shmuel, my time of Shasik Rav. Why should Rav be silent? The name Alei, he could have responded, Umeis Ha'ish Asher Shachavi Malavado. When it comes to a woman who is found in the field and is raped in the field, we say only the man who's betrothed or married. We say only the man is going to be executed, not the woman. So the question is, so the point is that we see a situation where only one of the people in the relationship is killed. So as a result, we can learn from that case over to our case and say, even if only one is killed, that's sufficient. Ketanai. And in fact, there is a machlokas tanaim about this particular topic. Umeisu gam shnehem. One opinion says, why does it say that they have to both die? Achiyu shneim shavim. They both have to be adults. Otherwise, one of them isn't going to be killed, and therefore you're not going to be able to kill the male in that, the adult one in that situation. Divrei Rabbi Yoshia. That's what Rabbi Yoshia says. Rabbi Yonatan Omer. Rabbi Yonatan says, no, we can use that pasuk that says the man lies alone with her and he alone is going to die. That's going to tell us that even one of them can be an adult, and that one would be killed. The idach. Well, what about Rabbi Yonatan? Hahi umetu gam shnehem my darish bay. What does your Rabbi Yonatan do with the phrase that they both are going to die? Doesn't that has to teach us something? So Rava says it's talking about acts of stimulation, meaning that if they don't actually have a relationship where both of them are going to have some sort of benefit, meaning the man stimulates himself but doesn't actually engage in any penetration. So as a result, that's going to not be covered. And so as a result, because she's not punished and not going to be killed, he's not going to be punished and not going to be killed either. V'idach, and according to Rabbi Yoshia, lav klumhi, are you going to tell me that kind of thing is nothing? Meaning, do we not, don't we need something to say that that's not going to be subject to the penalty? So ve'idach hai levado my darish bay. No, the point is that I'm sorry. My apologies. So let me. So how does Rabbi Yoshia understand it? So that actually act of stimulation is not considered an act that's relevant for our even thinking that it would be subject to the death penalty, because there is no penetration, there's no intercourse, there's nothing to say about it. The idach. So what does Rabbi Yoshia do with the second pasuk of Umesa Isha Sher Shachav Ima Levado, where it seems to indicate that you can kill one person by himself and not have to kill both of them? Kidetanya, he uses it like the following brisa. Bo ala asara b'nei adam, ba'adayin hi besula. If in fact 10 men have relations with her, and even after all of that, she is still a virgin, which means that they all had relations with her in an abnormal way. Kulam b'skila. So all of them are going to be killed with skila. That is the Tanakama. Rebbe Omer Harishim b'skila v'chulam b'chenek. Rebbe says no. If you have relations even in an abnormal manner, so then you are not considered a virgin any longer for the purposes of Na'ara Ma'orasa, and therefore you are going to be subject to strangulation and not skila. So Tana Rabbanan, another brisa on this point. So I'm sorry. So now the Gemara cites a related brisa that is unclear, and we're going to then explain it. And with that, we will finish. So Tana Rabbanan uvas ish kohen ki sechel liznos, that when you have a daughter of a kohen who profanes herself through adultery, Rebbe Omer, why does it say sechel, which sounds like tchila first? So tchila, it means first. V'chein hu omer, and similarly, it says in the Torah, Meta ish asher shakavi malavado. The man who lays with her alone, he shall die. So, my kamar, what in the world is this brisa telling us? It is completely unclear. So, if you think it's unclear, you're right. So, Amar Rav Yehuna braid the Rav Yehoshua. So, we're going to give two answers to what it means. First, Rav Yehuna. Rebbe Yishmael spherulay. Really, Rebbe holds like Rebbe Yishmael. And what did Rebbe Yishmael say? Da Amar Arusa Yatzaz L'Sreifa, that a betrothed daughter is not going to get the regular punishment, but she's going to get burning. So the point is that according to Rabbi Yishmael, remember we said this, we had this discussion a few weeks ago at this point, that according to some opinions, burning is the worst kind of punishment, and therefore it's a Na'aram Orasa, a betrothed daughter of a Kohen, who is going to be the one who gets the burning, the lo nesua, but not a fully married one. That wasn't the rabbinic position. The rabbinic position is because skila is the worst. There, it's only a nesua who gets the burning. But in any event, the Rabbi Yishmael says that it's the betrothed daughter who gets the burning, and a fully married one would not. So v'haki
Isn't that Rabbi Shimon? Isn't that the
Rabbi Yishmael.
No, isn't that the opinion
back then, yes, Rabbi
earlier?
Shimon is the one who says.
Isn't that Rabbi Shimon who has that opinion earlier in the Gemara?
Yes, but Rabbi Yishmael is sharing that opinion in saying that the burning is worse. But you're absolutely right that the Mishnah was Rabbi Shimon. V'hagi kamar, and this is what Rabbi is saying. Im tchilas bias biznus, if her first initial interaction as a daughter of a Kohen is an adulterous interaction, meaning that when she had the adulterous affair, she was still a virgin. Well, then bisreifa, then that's where she's going to be burned. V'idach bechenek. But if in fact she had already lost her virginity, so then it's going to be by strangulation. And so that's why that's what he means by Rebbe Omer tchila. Only if the first profaning of the daughter is this adulterous relationship, then she's going to be burned by fire. So, and because of that's how again, he suggests that it's because she is only a betrothed and not fully married, because if she were fully married, she would have had relations. So that's why he is suggesting, Rebbe would say, like Rebbe Yishmael, he's saying that in fact it means betrothed and not fully married. That is the case of a daughter of a Kohen who gets burned. So my v'chein, and what is the teaching of the additional pasuk? Umeis ha'ish asher shachavi malavado ki hasam, just as over there. Ma hasam b'tchilas bia kamashtae kra, that over there when we talk about the rule of a naram orasa, we're dealing with an initial relationship, and that's what is going to trigger stoning. Hachinami b'tchila bia kamishtae kra. Here too, we're talking about an initial relationship that is going to trigger burning. So that was answer number one. Answer number two, Amrle Rav Bibi bar Abaye. Rav Bibi says, I have a different answer. So, Marlo Haki Amar. My master didn't say this. Umanu, who is that? Rav Yosef. It's Rav Yosef. Rebbe Meir Svirale. Rebbe thinks like Rebbe Meir. De Amar Nises le'echad min apsulin, that a Kohen's daughter is if a Kohen's daughter marries one of the disqualified people and then she commits adultery, misasa bechenek v'haki kamar. Im tchilas achalata biznus bisreifa v'idach bechenek. So, according to Rebbe Meir, he says that the only time that you get, again, according to the other read of the daughter of a Kohen who is going to get burned, it's that she's fully married. So the question is who is she fully married to? If she's fully married to a regular person, so then she's going to get burning, because her first disqualification is through that having the improper relationship. But if in fact she was disqualified from being the daughter of a Kohen and being able to have truma because she chose to marry somebody else, well then her disqualification through having this adulterous relationship is no longer her first disqualification, and so as a result, she won't be killed by burning. She'll instead be killed by strangulation. So umay v'chein.
But the Kedushin is not Chal. If she marries someone to whom she's forbidden, then there's no
No,
Kedushin.
that is not necessarily the case. There are certain cases where you are. So Rashi specifically notes that if you marry a mamzer, it's still a marriage. That's still a valid marriage. You don't. It's not like she can just go out of the relationship without a get. And so that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the cases. You're right that there are some relationships where there isn't even a marriage, but here we're talking about the situations where there is a marriage, and so and like I said, Rashi specifically suggests the mamzer as the case.
So that's important to note that then.
Yeah. So umay v'chein, and what does it mean? Similarly, how is that additional pasuk similar? So it's just simana ba'alma, top words on samach zayin amud aleph. And Rashi explains, B'tchilat shum davar. All the point is that just as that case over there deals with a first, it has nothing to do. It's a first relationship, not a first profaning. And so as a result, but it's also a first. So B'tchilat shum davar hakasav medaber. So B'tchilat chalol miyahava. So as a result, it's some kind of profaning. It's not exactly the same kind of relationship, but the point is that just as over there, we care about whether or not it's the first relationship, so too over here, we care about whether it is the first profaning. And so with that, brings us to the next Mishnah, that discussion, which we'll discuss Mesit, that's one who encourages someone else to engage in idolatry. But for that discussion, stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Looking forward.
What's the point here that it's the first, that it's still considered skila then, or what?
First. Yeah, the first in connection with the case of the rape is, yes, it's a skila. Exactly, that's exactly right.
So when Rashi says that it doesn't matter what type of tequila it is,
right? When Rashi is saying is that we're learning from tequila of the initial relationship to the tchila of the first profaning, because the point is that the profaning in connection with the Bas Kohen could be her marrying somebody she's not supposed to marry, like a mamzer, and so as a result, it's not a perfect analogy. So the v'chein is not saying, oh, and it's the exact same thing, but rather, just as we have a first situation in the connection with the profaning, we also have a first situation in connection with the sexual relations.
So the punishment is the same then, right? It would be
no. Well, the Bas Kohen is punished with burning if it's the first, and the Bas and the Nara Morasa is punished with stoning. So it's not the same penalty either across it either way. Even according to the first answer, it wasn't the same penalty. It was just that in at least the first situation, we were explaining that both of them were talking about the first time of having sexual relations.
But it would be the first for each of those for each of those parties, though, right? So if we're saying it would the bat kohen mergosa, if she was engaged with a mamzer, that would be. I'm trying to for each of these individuals, the bat kohen and versus the other, and it would be whether she has the relation with and she's married to a mamzer or someone. It would still be the first, right?
Are you talking about no, it is not. In the Bas Kohen situation, in the first answer, it's about she's a orasa, she's only betrothed, and so as a result, it's both about first relationship, first intercourse. In the second answer, it's not about a first intercourse in both situations. One is about the first chilul, the first profanement of her, and that profanement doesn't have to come through intercourse. It could come through marriage to somebody that she's not allowed to marry.
Right. Okay. So if she's not allowed, if she's not allowed to marry that person, what's her penalty? Do we say that she's
The penalty, there is no, there is no specific penalty. I mean, maybe she's subject to lashes, but there's no. So the point is that she's no longer subject to the burning penalty because she had already profaned herself. So the first time that she profaned herself, it was not through the adulterous relationship, and therefore she's not going to be subject to the burning.
All right, so she's not subject to the severe penalty because she'd already had a first, whatever the first might
Correct.
be.
Correct. Exactly.
Okay, that's what the first could for each one. There's a first, well, because there was a first before. Now, the second, for the second engagement and second relation, then she's subject to the penalty of a second, regarding what the regardless what the first was. In either case, right? So now it's a second.
Correct. Correct. And that's the analogy. That's why it's a mnemonic, because even though it's a different kind of first, one is a profanement, one is about intercourse. They're both talking about what's key in both situations is it the first? And so as a result, that's why it says v'chein. Similarly, in this other case, it's similar. It's not exactly the same. In the first answer, it was both talking about the first sexual act, and so as a result, it was much more similar. But those are the two different answers that we have. All
Well, in the
right.
second case, there's still a sexual act because she married someone to whom she wasn't supposed to marry, right?
No, but it's the marriage itself that
Oh,
causes the problem,
oh,
not
so
the
so
sexual act.
so we saying the marriage, but if she quote unquote married this mamzer and she didn't have relations with him, it's still considered a first
Yeah,
act.
I think that she would still be profaned and not able to be have truma, etc. If she marries him, even if I think possibly even if he were to die while she is still just betrothed to him, she would not be able to go back to her father's house to have truma,
Even if she didn't have relations with him?
even if she didn't have relations, because she's not, it wasn't allowed to be betrothed to him. So
Is that
I'm
for
like I said, I'm not 100% sure of that, but
is that for sure?
I didn't say I was sure. I said that's what I think, because the point is that it's not the sexual act that is the problem. It's the fact that she is married to somebody that she's not allowed to marry. The same thing would be true if she were to marry a divorcee. It's also the same kind of situation. If no, well, she's obviously, problem is that it would be the flip side of it. If there is no man similar punishment, but if a man were to marry the divorcee, I don't think that it marries whether or not they have relations. I think it's just as soon as they marry that he becomes a chal.
I mean, a
So
Cohen.
yeah, a Cohen. That's what I'm talking. That's what we're talking about. We're talking
Right.
about a Bas Cohen, and now I'm saying the same kind of analogy with respect to a Cohen, male count Cohen. All right.
Even Be'eristin and not in the suing, he becomes a halal.
I'm going to double check that, and I'll have an answer for you tomorrow.
Well, tomorrow.
I'll have an answer for you next week. All right. Have a
Okay.
great Shabbos.